Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, hello, my lovely listener. It's Liz here, bringing you episode 192 of the Assist with Impact podcast. And you will not believe where I'm recording this episode. I'm actually recording it from inside my car on a very rainy day on our holiday, our beach holiday. We're on holidays here in Australia. And yes, it's a rather rainy day. So I thought I wanted to record this solo episode, my second for 2024. And I thought, where better to do it? Where's a nice quiet place away from the family? The car. So for those that have been listening to the podcast for a long time, you will know that way back when I started the podcast, I used to do these episodes called Road Rambling, which were literally recorded as I was driving to or from work. I stopped doing those a while ago, so you consider this a bit of a throwback. It is a road rambling, Liz 2024 style, sitting in the car. And my podcast episode for today is revisiting an idea that I first shared on the podcast way back on episode 70, when this podcast was called Being Indispensable. Now, it was episode 70, the first time I recommended that you adopt the idea of doing what I call a personal SWOT. So, SWOT is an acronym, and it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in my experience and in my mind, it is a fantastic way of gaining a snapshot of you, my lovely listener, at any moment in time. And the information that results from you spending the time doing a personal SWOT, can be hugely insightful and useful for you to give yourself feedback in terms of what's next. Now, if you've had the fortune, and I do say the good fortune, to attend one of my one-day training programs, you will have been taken through how to do a personal SWOT. And I've even given you in your workbook, I always provide a one-pager to do a personal SWOT as your homework. But be honest. Did you go away and devote the 25 minutes brainstorming that I actually recommended that you do to fully populate it? Inquiring minds would love to know. So why am I sharing this concept with you again? Well, I've just given you a hint. Sometimes you need to be exposed to an idea via repetition a number of times before it really, really lands with you. I heard a great quote on that point last year. It was that repetition is the key to mastery. I'm also sharing this concept of a personal SWOT and the value of doing one because January is the month of building self-insight. So I've put together a content plan for this year, and each month I'm going to be talking about one aspect, one of the 5 pillars of my impact and insight model, the linchpin model. It's called the impact and insight zones, and self-insight is one of them. So in episode 191, if you listen to that, you heard me talk about my approach to kicking off this new year, and I discussed the importance of SMART goals. So hopefully you will have done a little bit of R&R Liz style, as I'm calling it, which is reflection and review Liz style. And now you might be thinking, you might be immersed, or at least thinking about some SMART goals for 2023. And I'm a strong believer that doing a personal SWOT is a great way to start this process. So in this podcast, I'm going to share with you some background as to why I think it's important and give you a little bit of an overview of each component of the SWOT. And I want to start with some name dropping, just to build credibility of why a personal SWOT is something that I think is really important. And it's one of my favourite name drop people, Stephen Covey, from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So Stephen Covey talks about the idea of building the skills, values and behaviours that enable you to be effective. And if, for you, my lovely listener, that's about enabling you to protect the time and the energy of your exec and be that strategic partner that you want to be. So one of these is, that he talks about in his book is the idea of effectiveness. And you've heard me talk about why it's important to be effective, not just efficient. Well, Stephen Covey says that effective people are guided by their own missions and manage their lives according to principles. Ineffective people follow other people's agendas and manage their lives around others. Now, we are all guilty of putting aside our own needs and desires for other people. But just think about it in terms of this particular area as an opportunity for you to build your effectiveness. It's about the difference between being somebody that is proactive versus somebody that is reactive. And being proactive is something that I am all in for in terms of you as executive assistants and office professionals. So when we look at Stephen Covey's work, he has this chart in the book that compares effective people versus ineffective people. And again, in his habit number 1, it's all about being proactive. Proactive people do more than take initiative. They recognise that they are responsible for their own choices and they have the freedom to choose based on principles and values rather than on moods or conditions. Proactive people are agents of change. And the flip side of that is that ineffective people are reactive. Reactive people don't take responsibility for their own lives. They feel like victims, a product of circumstance and other people, and they do not see themselves as the creative force of their lives. And that, my dear listener, is not what I want for you. I want you to be the master of your own destiny, or the mistress of your own destiny. I want you to be proactive and develop that habit number 1 of Stephen Covey's. So if you're not familiar with the term SWOT analysis, it's something that's commonly used in business, and it's a way of evaluating the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as they apply to a product or perhaps a service or a business. And what I'm encouraging you to do is do this thing called a personal SWOT. Now, let's talk about 4 reasons why that's a good idea. Number 1 is that, as I said, we're at the start of a new year. So it's a really good way of putting a stake in the ground and plotting where you are in terms of those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as they're relevant to you. So, it's a good idea. If you're somebody that wants to take ownership for your career, take ownership for how you're perceived in your role, then it is a no-brainer that a SWOT analysis is something for you to have in your kit bag. Number 2 is that doing a SWOT makes things measurable. It's a really great way of measuring your distance from your desired goals. So quite often we'll be advised to, let's, for example, have a SMART goal. I've already talked about that in the episode 191. You need to have things that you're aiming for, but goals on their own without a plan of how you're going to get there, that's a pretty meaningless end. So when we're talking about setting SMART goals, we're doing this from the basis of a SWOT analysis. Being able to see clearly how far away you are from reaching that desired goal. And you need to know if it's realistic, the R in SMART. Now, number 3 is because it helps you understand who you really are as a person. It's a self-reflective exercise. You don't have to share it with anyone, but by doing it, you're getting some insight, some self-insight. And as I said, that's my theme of the month. So if you're honest with yourself, it's a really great way of getting a handle on all of these things that are so important to your career currency. Your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats that exist for you. And finally, number 4, for why I think it's a good idea, is because you can use the output to update your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So the bottom line is that it's a holistic approach to developing yourself. And it takes into account all the aspects that are going to go towards you moving forward personally and professionally. Now, I always undertake a SWOT analysis with anyone that I'm working with on one of my longer term coaching contracts. And I recommend it to all my clients. And there's times when it's going to be more important and more relevant for you. And one of those is when you're considering a job change or a promotion. But I can honestly say that doing a personal SWOT analysis, you will not regret it. It will be so useful and it will be so informative. So let's talk about each of the elements, the S, the W, the O, and the T. First thing to think about is that when you're approaching it, it's about thinking about what's within your control and what's beyond your control. So a classic SWOT matrix analysis is drawn up as a 2x2 matrix. 2 columns, 2 rows. Strengths and weaknesses, top left and top right, and opportunities and threats, bottom left and bottom right. Think about the top half, the row 1, as what's within your circle of influence, the positive and negative traits and characteristics, and the bottom half as external positive or negative factors that you may or may not be able to take advantage of. So let's look at the strengths box. When I'm doing this visually, I've got this all represented visually, but in the strengths box, we've got your technical skills, your hard skills, as well as your soft skills, those power skills. We've got your industry knowledge, your contacts and your network, your education and your qualifications, and your personal accomplishments. So doing that alone can be an invaluable jumping off point, just so that you can rewrite the personal statement section of your resume, or even use it to write the about section of your LinkedIn profile. Writing down your strengths also gives you a boost of self-confidence. And we can all do with a bit of that. It's empowering to take ownership of your strengths. Some of us really struggle with identifying our strengths. We can be really good at giving ourselves negative feedback, but we can feel like we're big noting ourselves or bragging when we say that I'm really good at something. But it's not bragging. It's stating facts and being, proud that you're good at something. So my tip for you is, for each strength you identify, come up with an example of where you've demonstrated this strength in action. Aside from anything else, aside from just affirming that it is actually a strength, you're going to be able to be ready for that moment when an interviewer, or perhaps even your manager in your performance review, asks what your particular strengths are. You want to be able to share them and paint them a picture. Another recommendation I read is to use the PAS model, which is an acronym. So personality is the P. What personality traits do you consider to be your strength? What tells you that? What evidence do you have to support this? What personality traits do others consider to be your strengths? And what feedback or comments have you had from others? So that's starting with the evidence. Then you look at the A, your attributes. What attributes and skills do you consider to be your strengths? Again, what tells you that? What's your evidence to support this? Where's the attributes and skills that you can point to, and where's the feedback and the comments that you've had from others to support that? And finally, the S are your successes. What successes did you have, or can you cite? What achievements are you most proud of? What strengths have you had to draw on to achieve those things? Now, then we move on to the weaknesses. And when it comes to the weaknesses box, I want you to be realistic about what they are. But this is a process. This is not a process of turning weaknesses into strengths. I'm all about you working out how to mitigate or reduce the impact of your weaknesses. So for me, for example, if you think about me, I know that a weakness of mine is that I have a tendency to set high expectations of myself, and I'm hypercritical when I feel that I don't meet them. And sometimes I can put that onto other people. Now, despite years of therapy, yes, therapy, I'm a big fan of the talking doctor, that is a weakness I'm stuck with. So I work on managing my expectations of myself and others, but I don't expect to be rid of what I call Uma unrelenting, that part of my personality, anytime soon. So a positive approach to weaknesses is to focus on those that you can change, and they're the ones that are related to your hard skills. For example, for me, my inbox management is a weakness. I'm very particularly hopeless at inbox management. So I might say that in order to deal with that and turn that from a weakness into a strength, I might identify a SMART goal of enrolling in an online course. Or even better, outsourcing to my lovely VA. When it comes to opportunities and threats, that's where you can really have some fun, thinking about the various ways these present themselves. For example, when we're talking about opportunities, you can think of industry change, the opportunity to change industries, the opportunity to enhance your soft skills or your hard skills, the opportunity to improve your industry knowledge, to build your career skills, to get investment or to invest yourself in training and development, or to increase your personal accomplishment. So think about what networking events, educational classes, training, conferences could you attend? And then your SMART goal turns into an I will statement. I will investigate XYZ. For example. So thinking about how you could then look at your identified strengths to open up any possibilities and opportunities. When it comes to the threats, again, it's things like industry trends. Is your industry declining or contracting? The cost of training, time constraints, personal limitations, your job. Yes, that is rain pouring on the car, by the way, making a little noise on the outside of the car. Geography or your company. So threats are the obstacles or barriers that you may face that could be threatening your success. So now we've talked about why it's important and we've talked about what it is. Let's talk about how to do one for yourself. So it isn't something that should take a long time. A SWOT is a brainstorming activity. My advice is to get your phone and set your timer for 25 minutes. You do want to do it all in one go without any distractions. So pick a time and a location where you aren't going to be interrupted or disrupted. Grab yourself a beverage. If you're like me, that would be a Coke Zero and a big piece of paper. Maybe even some coloured pens. You're going to label those squares, 2 up, 2 down, S, W, O and T. You're going to date it so that you can come back to it at a future date and compare it to another one that you've done. Now, I've said that it should be a brainstorming activity, but what I also want you to think about is that it is an opportunity for real reflection and introspection. So set aside the time to do it, then sleep on it and go back to it the next day. You won't think of everything in one sitting, and you might think of things overnight. And they might be really revealing insights. So return to it the next day or a few times over the next week to really capture complete answers. But what I also want you to remember is not to overthink things. And if one area is harder than another, just move on and come back to it. I also want you to remember that you're a human being, not a human doing. So think about your SWOT in terms of both your work and your home life. Sometimes our achievements are gained by drawing on strengths that are part and parcel of the whole you. So it's important to identify those strengths. And then finally, I want you to put your SWOT into action by developing those SMART goals, those I will statements. SWOT analysis can fail to be effective when they're simply treated as a laundry list without any tie-in to how what you've identified can be put into play, put into action, transformed, leveraged. The best outcome is to then take action and focus on the opportunities you've identified. That's where your SMART goals are, the root of your SMART goals are. And it can benefit you on a personal and a professional level and set you apart from your peers and your colleagues. And once you've created your SMART goals and you've got your action plan, track your progress. Set up your measurements, the M part of the SMART goals, and put some dates in the calendar to work towards them. Now, I want to finish with one of my favourite quotes from the famous US entrepreneur Jim Rohn. He said, "Work harder on yourself than you do on your job." I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict what the employment market will do in 2024 or what your personal situation will look like, my lovely listener. But what I can say is that if you undertake a personal SWOT as part of your 2024 kickoff, you will be better positioned to thrive, not just survive this year. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.